Most of us are conditioned to tackle resistance head-on. When we want someone to do something, we default to direct logic, raise our voices, and issue clear, explicit commands to force the outcome. But when the goal is genuine persuasion, blunt force is often counterproductive. It triggers psychological reactance, an automatic reflex that fires in the brain whenever a person feels their freedom to choose is being stripped away. The second you issue a direct order, the other person's internal objective changes. They stop evaluating the actual truth of your argument and immediately prioritize protecting their own ego. You cannot overcome this by applying more pressure. Pushing harder only reinforces their psychological wall, making them increasingly resistant to whatever you have to say to them. Bypassing those mental defenses requires a method historically used by elite strategists. It is often labeled reverse psychology, but it operates as a deeply Machiavellian framework. The core philosophy at work here is the paradox of power. It dictates that to gain actual influence, you must execute the exact opposite of your natural instinct for dominance. You have to abandon the illusion that force equals compliance. Instead, the objective is to carefully engineer the environment so your target ends up persuading themselves. We are taught to display total competence in every situation. In the workplace, appearing flawless at everything typically results in being burdened with low-level responsibilities. The strategy of controlled incompetence suggests that deliberately stepping back from certain tasks preserves your energy for high-leverage decisions. This applies directly to negotiation through the false weakness strategy. By intentionally projecting mild vulnerability or insecurity, you signal to your opponent that you are not a threat, prompting them to lower their guard and reveal hidden information. This diagram of two opposing forces illustrates the concept of strategic surrender. When facing an aggressive opponent in a heated debate, the natural reflex is to push back. But if you suddenly agree with them, you eliminate the friction entirely. Stripped of an enemy to fight, their defensive wall collapses. They stumble into empty space. Without your resistance to lean on, they often calibrate against themselves, walking back their own points and negotiating down their own demands. Strength in a negotiation is less about proving invincibility and more about weaponizing perceived weakness to disarm the opponent's ego. We also equate talking with controlling the room, yet deploying the power of silence deliberately creates a heavy, uncomfortable psychological vacuum. The human brain despises empty conversational space. If you simply stop talking after stating a price or asking a question, the other person will almost always rush to fill the void, typically by making unprompted concessions or oversharing details. This logic tree visualizes the illusion of choice. If you present someone with two distinct options, their brain becomes so occupied with exercising its autonomy to choose between them, it fails to notice that both paths lead to your predetermined destination. You bypass the need for direct commands entirely. You take this a step further with implanted ideas. By phrasing your directives as open-ended questions, the target's brain generates the conclusion on its own. Because they thought of it, they take ownership of it. The most persuasive voice in any room is often the one that speaks the least. You hold the power by designing conversational boundaries that make the other person believe they are the ones in charge. Our default method for motivating people is constant praise. But constructive pessimism and the ego challenge offer a sharper tool. Questioning someone's ability forces them to engage their ego. Completing the task becomes a way to validate their own self-image. This counterintuitive logic governs desire. The forbidden fruit effect proves that strictly restricting access to a resource instantly multiplies its psychological value. Being constantly available makes your presence a predictable, low-value habit. Strategic withdrawal involves calculating your absences, triggering the scarcity principle so people actually notice the weight of your presence. High motivation thrives on the tension created by scarcity and psychological friction, which often proves more effective than constant presence or verbal encouragement. This visual test demonstrates the contrast principle. Decisions are rarely based on pure logic. They are dictated by context and side-by-side comparison. Our brains evaluate the world through relative differences. Frame the initial environment, and you control the final decision. While these strategies are effective at shaping perception, using them for short-term exploitation erodes the trust that holds professional and personal alliances together. Developing a deep understanding of human nature removes the need for confrontation. True influence becomes a byproduct of how you structure the environment, rather than how much force you apply.